Hello, I'm Jeff Kleinman, the editor-in-chief of BevNet and Project Nosh, and I'm here at the Natural Products Expo East conference. I've got the opportunity to speak to a veteran investor in the natural and healthy products space, the esteemed David Thibodeau of Wellvest Capital Management. And for the people who may not be aware of the kind of work you've done in the past, could you just give a quick read on your background there?
Certainly, I'd love to. Thank you for having me today. It's delightful to be with you. My history goes back some 30 years in this category, where I started as an entrepreneur with my own natural food company, and then that evolved into investment banking and investing over the last 30 years. So I've experienced this industry's growth from when products tasted about as good as their boxes they were packaged in to what we see today on the show floor, which is 100 times different than what it used to be like.
So we were talking about the industry's growth before we started shooting, and you made the comment that basically originally the conference was the size of the press room, right?
Correct. I bet don't hold me to these stats, but it's probably grown 50 times since my first show in the late 80s. So there is a significant amount of capital coming into this space. And it's been driven by the growth, the uptick in the consumer. Today, I think natural and organic food sales are about 8% of the overall retail food sales in the United States. That's up from some 3% only 10 years ago.
Certainly.
So that's driving a lot of interest, a lot more consumers into the space. The evolving demographics, particularly with the younger group that understands what goes into their body, is very, very important. So it's driving the plant-based type focus we're seeing today, alternative protein sources, snacking as the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh meal. Those are the trends we're seeing today, and that's where the money is going.
So David, considering that a lot of the money coming in is thinking about a generational play, kids that were born and raised in G diapers and then continuing on to sort of plum organics, a lot of the money imagines that there's a major generational shift. But at the same time, we're seeing kind of technological plays in the natural food space. Can you explain a little bit about how these things are intersecting?
Absolutely. The money that's coming from either previous tech investors or ag tech investors
Certainly.
is coming in to drive new sources of food, new sources of protein. So we see companies that are developing new food products that will supplement meats, that will take meats out of ultimately, their goal would be no more meat products. It would be alternatives that are driven by plant-based sources. And what's happening is the population growth over the worldwide is so dramatic that we can't feed the world. Right. So these different investments are ultimately, in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, are going to be the major sources of protein to feed the world. And that's where a lot of this money is going.
Now, what's amazing about that is we're seeing really very early branding of these kinds of products. Your Impossible Foods, which, it's impossible to get that burger. Beyond Meat is just in a sort of test rollout in a couple of stores. Certainly Just Mayo has had its stumbles, although its products have spread throughout the marketplace pretty well. Is that sort of plant-based meat replacement protein space where some of the snacking and beverage plays were 10, 15 years ago?
not even close to where those products were 10 years ago. I think these are long-term plays to get the consumer really involved and bought into these types of products. We're changing consumer habits. That is the most expensive way to market a consumer product. But what's happening is we have a core base. It's like the center of a bullseye. That core base is awfully committed to these alternatives. And as time goes by and more people get into that center, it will drive the success of, if not those companies, the companies that come after them. And what I find really interesting is that because of the hype that these companies have produced, both on the investment side as well as on the consumer side, we're seeing a lot of smaller companies succeed, which is what you see here today. It's why this show is as big as it is, because you see a lot of entrepreneurs in that age group saying, I can do this, I have an idea, I can make a product right now, right here, that's going to be appealing. And so they're going for it, and they're getting the funding to do it.
Are the longer term plays, those sort of major shifts in behavior and the money that's chasing them, are they creating unrealistic expectations for valuations for those incremental chain
Absolutely.
companies?
The answer to that question is absolutely, and it does it every time, whether it's dollars coming in as investment or outsized M&A transactions where a strategic must have one of our companies and they're willing to pay through the ceiling for it.
Or small investor or newer investors will ante up just to get in the game.
Yes, that does happen.
Now, what kind of effect does that have on the development of the companies themselves? I think is
what
one of
we
the concerns
find
we
is
see.
that some of the best companies are those that are put together on shoestrings and have a very tight purse string. So they don't have a lot of money in the bank. They have to think about each and every move they make and each and every dollar they're spending. It's a lot easier if you have several $1 million or tens of millions of dollars in the bank and you're not really thinking about how to spend money. We want to invest in companies that will think about how they're spending money. Every penny of that and every dollar.
Now that we've talked about that, I just wonder what you're here looking for on behalf of Wellvest.
We're looking for companies that are not Me Too products. So just because you have GMO-free on your product or just because it's organic doesn't make it a unique product. Those are almost badges you have to have if you're going to be successful breaking into a category. And so I'm looking for category leaders, companies that are doing unique things, maybe an interesting platform, maybe the same delivery. So it may be a chip, but it's a chip with a proper ratio of macronutrients.
Certainly.
So that's the type of thing I'm looking for, because that's what will drive consumers to change their thinking about how they're eating and what they're eating and where their macronutrients are coming from. And that, in my opinion, is the game.
Well, David, good luck finding those companies out there on the floor. And you can find more information from us at BevNet and Project Nosh. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Kleinman.